Stephen Curry finds out his childhood shooting coach died alone, then pays for the funeral himself. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today, and if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. Stephen Curry stood in front of the locker room mirror, sweat still clinging to his skin, adrenaline tapering off. The Warriors had just pulled off a tough road win. 32 points. 5 threes. The post-game buzz was already humming on social media, and yet, he wasn't smiling. He hadn't smiled much lately, not really. Winning felt like maintenance now, not magic. The kind of quiet that settles in when you've seen too much of both the high and the hollow. He pulled his hoodie over his head and stepped into the hallway just as one of the team assistants caught up to him, hand extended, holding out a sealed envelope. "This came for you, Steph." No return address. Steph nodded, barely looking at it, slipped it into his bag, and kept walking. Another sponsored dinner awaited. Another interview. Another repeat of the same story, his rise, his stats, his faith, his family. People loved the arc. They rarely asked who helped him build it. It wasn't until midnight, in his hotel room, when the lights were low and the city was quiet, that he remembered the envelope. He pulled it out, tore it open casually, until the headline stopped him cold. Harold Hal Blevins, 72. No known family. No service scheduled. Cremation pending. A grainy newspaper clipping was stapled to a funeral home card. There was a time and a date. Nothing else. For a full 30 seconds, Steph just stared. Then his chest tightened. Hal Blevins. He hadn't heard that name in years. Not since his high school days back in Charlotte. Hal wasn't on any payroll. He wasn't listed on a team website. He didn't wear whistles or polo shirts. He was just there. At the rec center every morning, ball in hand, stopwatch in pocket. He had a hitch in his step and an obsession with shooting form. Kids used to laugh at his baggy tracksuits and the cassette player he'd wear on his hip. But Hal saw something in Steph before anyone else did. Before the scouts. Before Davidson. Before the NBA. Steph remembered it now. The first time Hal corrected his elbow placement. How he made him shoot 100 free throws in silence, just to hear the rhythm. How Hal never missed a morning, even when it rained, even when he limped more than he walked. And now the man who had shaped his foundation had passed. Quietly. Alone. No family. No funeral. Steph sat down, the paper trembling slightly in his fingers. His phone buzzed beside him, a reminder for a scheduled photo shoot the next morning. He silenced it. Then he picked it up again and called his manager. "Cancel tomorrow. And the day after," he said. "You've got 2 sponsor appearances." "What's going on?" "I need to fly home." "To Charlotte?" "Why?" Steph hesitated. "Someone who taught me everything just died," he said quietly. "And I didn't even know until now." The next morning, there was no media trail. No announcement. Steph packed a duffel, wore a low-profile cap, and boarded a red-eye out of San Francisco. By the time he landed in North Carolina, gray clouds hovered over the skyline. He didn't call anyone. Didn't text. This wasn't for the headlines. The funeral home was a brick building wedged between a shut-down pawn shop and a faded diner. There were no limos parked outside. No guests milling about in suits. Just an old white sign, "Service for Harold Blevins, 11 a.m." He stepped inside. The room was dimly lit. One small bouquet of flowers sat beside a photo, Hal, much younger, holding a clipboard, squinting at the camera like it had interrupted him mid-instruction. A clerk stood behind the podium, clearing his throat. Steph looked around. No pews were filled. No music played. He was the only one there. He sat down in the front row, folding his hands, eyes locked on the picture. The clerk began reading a standard eulogy. It was distant, impersonal. A script. Harold Blevins was born in 1951. Worked various jobs. A man of quiet routine. No criminal history. Never married. No children or next of kin. The word stung in a way Steph hadn't expected. It sounded like a resume stripped of life. Like hell had never mattered beyond the lines of a spreadsheet. Steph raised his hand gently. "May I say something?" he asked. The clerk nodded and stepped aside. Steph walked to the front of the room. He looked at the empty seats, the dusty light filtering through the windows, and back at Hal's photo. He exhaled. "I don't think Hal cared about being known," he began. "But he should have been." He paused. The words didn't come like they did in interviews. They came slowly. From somewhere deeper. "When I was a kid, I wasn't the biggest. I wasn't the fastest. A lot of coaches said I wouldn't make it past high school ball. But Hal didn't care about any of that. He only cared about how the ball left my fingertips. He cared about form. Rhythm. Belief." He glanced back at the photo, lips pressed tight. "Hal used to say the arc of your shot is like your life. It might dip low. It might get ugly. But if you put in the work, trust the release, it'll rise again." Steph swallowed the lump in his throat. "He gave me everything he had. His time. His wisdom. His belief. He did it without pay. Without cameras. He never asked for anything. I wouldn't be standing here today if not for him." The room remained silent. But it didn't feel empty anymore. Steph reached into his bag and pulled out an old cassette tape. He held it up. "I found this in his house once." He labeled it Steph 2001. "It's just me, missing shots. Over and over. But you can hear his voice in the background, every time." He clicked the small portable player. The room filled with Hal's scratchy voice. "Again. Again. You're not broken. You're building." Steph let the tape run for a moment. Then turned it off. "He believed in me before the world did," he said softly. "And I never got to thank him." He placed the tape beside the photo, gave one final look at the picture, and stepped back to his seat. There was no applause. No fanfare. Just a moment, quiet, powerful, and real. And in that moment, it wasn't MVP Steph Curry sitting in a funeral home. It was a kid saying goodbye to the man who helped him believe in the arc. Steph didn't leave the funeral home right away. He stayed behind after the clerk gave a quiet nod and wheeled the photo and flowers away. The lights were dimming, but Steph sat there, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. His mind ran through memories that came in no particular order: sweat-drenched mornings in the old rec gym, Hal's sharp corrections shouted over the squeak of sneakers, the sound of a net snapping when he finally nailed the release. And that stubborn old truck Hal used to drive, with the door that jammed and the heater that didn't work. Hal never complained. Not once. He just showed up, always holding that same clipboard with smudged notes. Hal had no children, no family, no awards hanging in his house, yet he gave everything to Steph without asking for anything in return. Steph finally stood up, the room feeling colder now. He walked outside into the wind, pulled his hood up, and stood on the empty sidewalk. No fans, no reporters. Just the gray sky, the sound of a distant car, and the thought that haunted him most: no one else had come. Later that night, he sat in a rental car outside a rundown house in a forgotten part of town. The address came from the funeral home's clerk, who warned him it wasn't in great shape. Condemned last month, the man had said. No next of kin to claim it. Steph got out, crunched over broken leaves, and peered through the dusty window. It looked exactly like how Hal lived, simple, unbothered by time. A lawn chair inside instead of a couch. A cracked mirror in the hall. And then, through the shadows, something caught his eye. A stack of boxes, each one labeled with duct tape and a Sharpie. One word on every label: practice. He broke the lock with help from a local locksmith. He wasn't supposed to be in there, but he didn't care. Inside, the air was musty, thick with dust and the smell of old books and rusted pipes. He moved through the small living room into a back room where the boxes were. He crouched down, opened the top one, and froze. Tapes. Dozens of them. VHS. Mini DV. Even old cassette recordings. Each marked with a name and year. Some said Marcus 1998, Jalen 2000, Steph 2001, 2002, 2003. He pulled one out and held it like it was gold. Hal hadn't just trained him, he had recorded him, studied him. Kept everything. He found an old portable VHS player nearby. Took a risk and plugged it in. It sparked a little but came to life. He slid in the first tape labeled Steph 2001, Form Drills. Static at first, then the image came through blurry, but clear enough. There he was. A younger version of himself, maybe 13 or 14, lanky, awkward, missing shots left and right. The rim was crooked. The ball bounced off in every direction. But Hal's voice in the background never wavered. Square your feet. Elbow tighter. Let the wrist fall like water. Again. Steph sat there, watching. His jaw clenched. He hadn't cried earlier, not during the eulogy, not even when he spoke. But now, sitting in a forgotten house, watching a forgotten man pour everything into his younger self, it hit him. All those mornings, all those words. Hal gave him something more valuable than any trophy. He gave him belief when no one else did. And Steph had let him fade out of his life. He stayed in the house for over an hour, digging through the rest of the tapes, old notebooks filled with shooting drills, diagrams, and even scattered newspaper clippings about Steph's college career, highlighted, underlined. Hal followed every step. Steph took the tapes. He carefully packed them into a box and drove them back to the hotel. He didn't sleep that night. Instead, he watched them. One by one. A time machine into his own past, narrated by a man who never wanted credit. The next morning, he made 2 calls. First, to his foundation's director. "We're building something," he said. "Something real. Not for headlines. A gym. A rec center. Somewhere Hal's name lives on." The second call was to his publicist. "No press. Don't leak anything. I don't want this on ESPN or social media. This is personal." That afternoon, he met with a small construction team and city planners. He picked a plot of land not far from Hal's old home, a neglected area where kids still played ball in worn-out sneakers and bent rims. He walked the lot himself. Stood in the center. Closed his eyes and imagined what Hal would say. "Don't make it flashy. Make it useful." A week later, the plans were drawn. The Harold Blevins shooting lab. Nothing fancy. Just real hardwood, quality baskets, plenty of space, and open hours for anyone who wanted to learn. Steph made sure it was stocked with drills Hal created, posters with his old sayings. And on the front door, a small plaque, "You're not broken. You're building." He flew back to the Bay after that, back to his team, his schedule, the swirl of NBA life. But something in him had shifted. He practiced harder. Spoke less. Focused more. Because now, every 3 he sank, every game he closed, every kid watching him, they were all standing on a foundation Hal built in silence. Months passed. The gym opened without a press conference. No ribbon cutting. Just a few kids shooting on a Tuesday afternoon. But word spread fast. Coaches came. Former players. Even some guys Steph used to train with showed up, shocked to see the name. One kid, maybe 10 years old, short and wiry, asked the coach one day, "Who's Harold Blevins?" The coach smiled and pointed to the quote on the wall. "A man who taught Steph Curry how to shoot," he said. "And never asked for a thank you." That night, Steph watched a video someone sent him from the gym. It showed that same kid hitting his first perfect free throw. The camera caught the moment he looked back at the plaque on the wall, smiled, and whispered the words. "You're not broken. You're building." Steph put his phone down, sat quietly, then whispered it back. "Thank you, Coach." The NBA season pressed on. Games, travel, practice, endorsements, press junkets. The usual rhythm. But Steph wasn't moving through it the same way anymore. The routine felt heavier now. Not in a bad way, just with more weight behind each motion. He was carrying something unseen. That voice from those tapes still echoed in his head. That old living room. That broken VHS. That first tape of him missing 10 in a row. And still, Hal's voice had said, again. It was the word that mattered more now than ever. The Warriors were in the middle of a road trip when a reporter asked him during a post-game presser, "Steph, you seem more focused lately. What's changed?" He paused, half-smiled, and simply said, "I've been revisiting the basics." No one questioned it. They never do when you're winning. But behind the scenes, Steph had started something else, something private. A team from his foundation had digitized all of Hal's tapes. Every drill. Every session. Every voice recording. The library was massive. It was more than training, it was a lifetime of devotion to a craft and the people behind it. Steph had them cataloged. Then he had another idea. He called his wife, Aisha. "I'm thinking of turning the tapes into a training series," he said. "For what?" "For kids like I used to be. Kids with no access. No real coaching. Just a ball and a driveway." "And Hal?" she asked. "He'll be the voice," Steph said. "It'll be called the Blevins Method. I want kids to know him like I knew him." She was quiet for a moment. Then simply said, he'd be proud. The next few weeks, between games and practice, Steph recorded intros and commentary. He kept it raw, no big lighting setups, no crew. Just him in a gym, showing the drills, then playing Hal's voice over top. Sometimes he'd pause the footage and just talk. "See how he told me to land soft? I thought it was just about ankles. It wasn't. It was about control, about learning to finish every motion with purpose." The clips were uploaded to a private site. Coaches from underserved communities were given access first. No press release. No sponsorship logo in the corner. This wasn't for the brand. It was for the kids. And they responded. Soon, messages started coming in. From an assistant coach in Mississippi, "Our JV team's been using the method all month. One kid finally hit 5 threes in a row. Cried after." From a mom in Detroit, "My son's never had a trainer. But he watches the Blevins clips every day before school. Says Coach Hal sounds like a grandpa who never gave up on him." Steph read each one. One night, after practice, he sat in the gym alone and loaded up one of the last tapes they digitized. This one was different. Hal wasn't recording a session. He was talking directly into the mic. A monologue. Probably never meant for anyone. Steph sat cross-legged and listened. "I'm not much for writing," Hal said, his voice tired but clear. "But if anyone ever listens to this, maybe after I'm gone, I just want one thing. Don't let the fundamentals die." He paused, coughed. "There's beauty in the basics. People want flash. Highlights. But the game is made in the in-between. The footwork, the release, the grind when no one's watching." Steph didn't blink. "And if that little Curry kid ever hears this," Hal added, chuckling, "I hope you kept your elbow tight, boy. I hope you stayed grateful." Steph hit pause. Took a deep breath. Closed his eyes. Grateful. It wasn't guilt he'd been feeling. Not quite. It was something deeper. Like he owed more than just his success to Hal, he owed him a continuation of the mission. To keep building. To pass it on. The next week, the foundation hosted a low-key camp at the newly opened Harold Blevins Shooting Lab. No banners. No flashy promos. Just word of mouth. Over 100 kids showed up. Steph flew in quietly. He didn't want the day to become about him. He wore a hoodie, no jersey, stood off to the side as local trainers led the drills, all of them using Hal's methods. The energy was different. Focused. Humble. Real. Then one kid caught his eye. Maybe 11 or 12. Barely taller than the ball he was dribbling. His jumper was all off, feet too close, elbow flaring, shot flat. But the kid didn't stop. Missed again. Grabbed the ball. Reset. Missed again. Steph walked over slowly. "Hey," he said gently. "Mind if I show you something?" The boy looked up, wide-eyed. Nodded quickly. Steph placed a hand on his shoulder. "You're shooting with all arm. You gotta let the legs join the rhythm. Try this." He positioned the boy's feet, adjusted the elbow. "Let him try again." Swish. The boy gasped. Steph smiled. "Coach Hell used to say," he murmured, "the arc is belief. If you believe in your form, the shot'll believe in you." The boy beamed. For the next hour, Steph went from kid to kid, no cameras rolling, just coaching. Teaching. The way Hal did. Quietly. Fully present. After the camp, one of the volunteer coaches approached Steph, holding a framed photo. It was Hal, same clipboard, same scowl of focus, but behind him, a teenage Steph, mid-jumper, locked in. "We found it in a box when we were setting up," the coach said. "Figured it belonged here." Steph took the frame, stared at it for a long time. It wasn't a photo of the past. It was a blueprint. The rest of the evening, Steph helped clean up. Stacked chairs. Picked up cones. Wiped down basketballs. And as he locked the doors behind him, he looked back at the empty court and whispered, "We're still building, Coach." And he meant every word. A few months later, the Harold Blevins Shooting Lab had become something more than a gym. Word had spread faster than Steph expected, not because of press coverage or highlight reels, but because of what the space represented: discipline, second chances, quiet effort. Coaches from different states were reaching out, asking for blueprints, asking for permission to replicate the drills. Steph's team said yes to everything. No licensing. No catch. Hal would have wanted it that way. But outside of that world, the NBA season continued its grind. The playoffs were approaching, and the Warriors were locked in a tight race for seeding. Steph was having one of his best shooting years in recent memory, and analysts were calling it a vintage Curry run. He didn't bother correcting them. Let them think it was about form. Or motivation. Or whatever stat they could put a number on. The truth was, it was simpler than that. He was shooting like a kid again. Like the version of himself on those tapes. With joy. With faith. With that voice in the back of his head. You're not broken. You're building. Still, the weight hadn't left completely. Late one night after a home win, Steph stayed in the arena. Everyone else had cleared out. The lights were low, the scoreboard dark. He stood alone at the free throw line. Just him and the ball. He bounced it once. Twice. Shot. Swish. He caught the rebound, stepped back, and did it again. Swish. Then again. Off the rim. He let it roll and didn't chase it. Instead, he sat down on the hardwood and leaned back against the base of the stanchion. Eyes closed. Sweat cooling on his neck. That's when he heard footsteps. He looked up. It was Draymond. "Figured I'd find you here," Draymond said, holding a water bottle and tossing him a towel. Steph nodded, wiped his face. "You all right?" Draymond asked, sitting beside him. Steph hesitated. Then answered, "Yeah. Just thinking." "About what?" Hal. Draymond leaned forward, elbows on knees. He knew the story now. Steph had told the team in fragments. Never made it a big deal, never wanted sympathy. But they understood. I keep asking myself why I never checked on him, Steph admitted. Why I let all those years go by. Draymond didn't answer right away. He just sat with him. Then said, "You're doing more for him now than most people do for the living." Steph stared at the floor. Doesn't make it right. No, Draymond said. But it makes it count. They sat in silence a while longer, two teammates, two men in different stages of life, both understanding the cost of legacy. Then Draymond stood. "Get some sleep, man. We need your legs tomorrow." Steph stayed another 5 minutes. Took a few more shots. Then finally grabbed his bag and headed home. The next morning, his foundation director called. "You've got a letter," she said. "Not email. Not a DM. An actual letter. Handwritten." Steph raised an eyebrow. "From who?" "No name on the envelope. Just says Blevins Method on the front." He told her to send a scan. 10 minutes later, he opened the file on his laptop. The handwriting was shaky, unsure. But the message was clear. "Dear Mr. Curry, I wanted to thank you for what you're doing. My son, Jalen, has always struggled in school. He's small, quiet. Gets picked on. But he loves basketball. Always has. I never had the money for private training. Then we found the Blevins videos. He watches them every night. He writes Coach Hal's quotes in a notebook. Says it's like having a coach in the room. 2 days ago, he made the school team for the first time. I've never seen him that proud. And I've never been more grateful. You gave my son a chance to feel seen. And you gave a good man his legacy back. Thank you. A single mom in Atlanta." Steph read it twice. Then once more. That afternoon, he filmed another training clip. Just him in the gym again. At the end of the video, he looked straight into the lens and said, "This one's for the quiet kids. The ones who keep showing up. Who don't need attention, just opportunity. Keep building." The clip went out with no announcement, no caption. That weekend, the team flew to Denver. Road game. High altitude. National TV. The game was tight. Warriors down 2. Final seconds. Ball in Steph's hands. Everyone expected the shot. He dribbled. Step back. Defender in his face. He rose. And then, he passed. Kick to the corner. Wide open 3. Swish. Warriors win. Reporters asked later why he didn't take the shot. He shrugged and said, "Sometimes belief means trusting the arc, even when it's not yours." That line made the highlight reel. But what didn't? After the game, Steph returned to the hotel and opened his laptop. There was a new message in the foundation inbox. This time from a former player. "Coach Hal trained me too," it read. "I never made it to the league. But I coach now. And I use his drills every day. Thanks for making people remember. He changed more lives than he probably ever knew." Steph leaned back in his chair, eyes scanning the message. Something clicked. That night, he called his team again. "I want to do something bigger," he said. "Bigger how?" "A documentary. Not about me. About Hal. About his life. His impact. Let's track down the kids he coached. Let's tell his story the right way." "Got it," they said. "You want producers? Directors? Hollywood?" "No," Steph said. "I want truth. No polish. Just the story." The work began. Quiet, methodical, just like Hal would have done it. They called it the arc that built us. But that came later. For now, Steph watched the game replay. Not to see the win. To see the moment he passed the ball. The trust in that moment was the product of everything Hal ever taught him. You're not broken. You're building. And Steph knew he still was. The hardwood echoed beneath Steph's feet as he walked through the front doors of the Harold Blevins shooting lab one last time that season. It was late June. The Warriors' playoff run had ended earlier than expected, and while fans debated what went wrong, Steph had already shifted his focus somewhere else. Inside the gym, the lights were on low. Outside, it was near dusk, the orange glow of the summer sky just barely bleeding in through the high windows. He'd told no one he was coming. No foundation reps, no staff. He didn't need company tonight. The court looked the same. It had the clean, worn-in feel of a place that got used often. That meant it was doing its job. The wall-sized photo of Hal now hung across the far side, centered above the main hoop. His clipboard in hand, his eyes squinting into the sun, the image looked more like a coach watching practice than a memorial. Steph walked over to the bench under it and sat down. He pulled out a letter. Not a script. Just something handwritten, folded twice. He unfolded it and started to read out loud. Hey, Coach. I figured this was the best place to talk to you. It's been a year since I found out you were gone. Still doesn't feel real. Thought I'd update you on a few things. He paused, let out a breath, then continued. They know you now. Thousands of kids know your name. They run your drills. They talk about arc and release and footwork like it's sacred. I think you'd like that. You're probably mad we named a gym after you, but too late now. He laughed quietly to himself, eyes still scanning the page. I read a letter from a mom last week. Said her son uses your drills as a way to calm down when school gets hard. Said he found his rhythm because of you. That's what you did, Coach. You gave rhythm to people who felt scattered. Steph folded the letter again and set it on the bench beside him. Then he stood up. Walked to the three-point line. Picked up a ball from the rack and bounced it once. His shooting hand twitched the way it always did before a shot. He squared up. Breathed. Shot. Swish. He let the silence settle. Not because he needed applause, but because that sound, the net snapping, meant something here. It wasn't about points. It wasn't even about winning. It was about proof. Proof of the work. Proof of belief. He shot again. Swish. And again. Until finally, he just sat on the court, cross-legged, like he did that night at the funeral home, back when everything started shifting. His mind wandered to the documentary. The arc that built us was almost done. The team had found over a dozen former players, community leaders, even janitors from the rec center where Hal used to coach. Each one had a story. Each one remembered something small, an encouraging word, a ride home, a lesson in persistence. Together, they painted a portrait of a man who changed more lives than anyone realized. What struck Steph most wasn't what Hal had done. It was how quietly he did it. In a world chasing noise, Hal made his mark in silence. That's what made it matter. Steph's phone buzzed. A text from Ishad. You okay? He replied, yeah. Just needed to see the court. Then another message popped up from his foundation director. You're going to want to read this. Forwarded you something from the NBA offices. He opened the email. Read the headline twice. In honor of his contributions to grassroots basketball, the NBA Foundation has approved an annual grant in Coach Harold Blevins' name, $500,000 per year for underfunded youth programs. Steph didn't smile. He just nodded. Finally, the world was catching up. He walked to the middle of the court, where the logo was painted simple, just black and white. Blevins' Method. He reached into his bag and pulled out one last item. An old, weathered cassette tape. He walked to the corner of the gym where a small media shelf sat. He popped the tape into the refurbished player, hit play. And there it was, Hal's voice. Don't aim for perfection. Aim for repetition. Get it wrong 1,000 times. Then right once. That's the one that stays. Steph closed his eyes and let the voice fill the space. There was something holy about it. Not in a religious way. In a human way. He turned off the tape after a minute. Took a seat again. Let the quiet stretch out. And then, the gym door opened. It was a boy. 10 or 11. Looked nervous. Sorry, the boy said. Didn't think anyone was here. Steph smiled, waved him in. You play? He asked. The kid nodded. Trying to get better. Steph stood, bounced him the ball. Want some help? The boy blinked. From you? Steph nodded. From Coach Hal, actually. He walked over, adjusted the boy's feet, checked his grip. Now, bend your knees. Keep your elbow in. Let your wrist fall like water. The boy shot. Clang. Steph caught the rebound and grinned. Again. The boy reset. Shot again. Rim and in. Steph nodded. Now you're building. That was the moment. Not a big game. Not a trophy. Just that. One boy. One shot. And a legacy living on, one release at a time. Steph stayed a while longer, helping the kid run drills. They didn't talk much. They didn't have to. When the session ended, the kid ran to the door, turned back, and said, "Thanks, Coach." Steph froze for half a second. Then gave the only answer that made sense. Anytime. He walked out of the gym that night feeling lighter. The arc wasn't just in his shot anymore. It was in his purpose. And it was still rising.